Clicked the button.
Welcome to your awakening. Please take care as your reality is adjusted.
Oh, no, stop. Do not repeat. Classic lag interruption there. Welcome back again, folks. Another edition of Excalibre on this moon day evening. Stop screen share. Right. Considering it lagged out halfway through anyway. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, greetings, well met, and hail, and salutations to all yous tuning in. I can see people in the chat room. Hello, people in the chat room, and we'll come back and say hello individually in a moment. First of all, get my screen sorted out. I can see comments on the StreamYard page. Hooray! And StreamYard has just introduced a new widget. That one. Now you can do ticker scrolls across the bottom of the screen. So we can have lots of things to distract you from what's going on while you're busy trying to read what's been written. But yeah. But it shows that they are developing and moving ahead and building and growing. More and more people making use of the functionality of this software, which is, it does what it says on the tin. It works well. For everyone I've encountered so far, apart from one person, couldn't get it to work in some fashion. I don't know why, but other than that, everybody else has been okay with it, and it does what it says. Thank you very much. So I will recommend that if people are interested in doing live broadcasting similar to this. While you still got the chance via GoTube, the YouTube. Yes, it is the 9th of the 12th, 2019. This edition of Excalibre will most likely be the last one I'll do for this year. I'll take a break for the next couple of weeks at least. I'll see when the dates fall for the new year. But I might do something in between. We've got another reality chat show on Wednesday and probably one next week as well, I think. If you remember what you said last week, Pete. So we'll see how the election plays out, and we'll be able to make comment and, do all that angry old men routine on it. But today is the day before the date that GoTube placed on the new wave of censorship. The 10th of December is the official start date. I think some channels out there may have jumped the gun and shut their own channels down to create a PR buzz so that their audience would be more inclined to follow them to new platforms, because they've sort of made a bit of a scene, a splash in the marketplace, because they jumped the gun ahead of the actual official start date. And saying all that, it's still based on whether or not the people at GoTube deem your channel to be unworthy in whatever fashion. If you're considered to be a heretic to the narrative, then you might get shut down. But I also think it's very much a sword of Damocles meant to create a chilling effect, so that they give you a nudge. They suggest that you go away. They imply the threat of closure, that sort of Damocles effect. so that people will be inclined to go, oh, well, let's just get out of here, move to a different platform, blah, blah, blah. And in that way, they create the enclosed space that they're after. Very much a corporate and corporatized marketplace that is just a new version of the mainstream, the old mainstream media paradigm, moved from the television box to the internet technology. And this YouTube environment has dominated the video presentation part of that media format, media paradigm. And I'd also say, right from when this process began, I thought that they would encourage people to move to other sites just in that process of getting you out of YouTube. And it's quite possible, I want to say probable as well, certainly for some of the platforms out there, that they have been deliberately created to not only enable this effect, but to act as a safe zone, supposedly, a controlled opposition platform, a honeypot, to draw people off YouTube and into these little enclosed echo chamber safe spaces where you can be more readily monitored by a smaller group of operators. Therefore, it reduces their costs, so it improves their cost efficiency, and at the same time means you're more controlled because they've got you well away from the public sphere. If the internet as a whole is viewed, using an analogy, if the internet as a whole is viewed as the marketplace of communication to, exchange ideas and information, then the center ground of that marketplace, the busiest area where the most people move through and the most amount of information is transferred, is places like YouTube, the big main platforms that exist on the internet. Not necessarily because they're good at doing it, but simply because the mass of the people have gathered there for various reasons. Some of that is engineered, some of it is just people's choice of convenience and availability and things like that. They want us away from that main center ground so that the majority of the public don't hear anything that's being said. You're not even seen, you're not visible, you're shadow banned, you're pushed into the shadows, you're pushed to the back of the shelf, blah, blah, blah. Think of all the metaphors you like, yeah? But they're encouraging us all to go away. I've made backup accounts on multiple platforms over the years. I had a Vimeo account and a few others I can't remember off the top of my head now unless I start going through old bookmarks. But up to recent times, I've kept my Steam account going, even though I haven't really done anything with it. And I've now got a BitChute account, so that if they decide to shut me down, if the GooTube controllers decide to drop that sword on my head, then I've got other places on the internet where I can do this kind of format again. Might need to do some other setups if I want to do live broadcasting again, but certainly in terms of uploading videos or posting comments, stuff like this, other platforms that can be used. But I'm not going to just walk away. I think this is part of the process that they're attempting to do. They would rather people leave by choice, even if that is a enforced false choice. They would rather you walk away of your own choosing to, rather than them having to be proven to be the tyranny that they are. So basically similar to how, and I know that people hate the cliches of this kind of stuff, but similar to how Gandhi demonstrated the process, forced the tyranny to reveal itself to be a tyranny. So in that way, the general populace, you don't have to have a long conversation explaining complex ideas and philosophical arguments to them. No, you just go, look what the tyranny did. There's a clear example for you of what they do that proves that they are a tyranny. So they want me to go away. They've got to shut me down, kick me off. I don't know if they will. for a while now been thinking they might like the fact that I'm still here, being a small channel in sort of like the backwaters of YouTube, where the general populace don't see me because the main herd rushes through the trending section of YouTube. They're dragged through that section. They're funneled in certain directions by the algorithms. So they're not likely to see me anyway in the first place. But from YouTube's point of view, they can then turn around and say, well, look, this guy's still doing his, he's still talking. He's got his supposed access to output into a public media sphere. So you can't say we're censoring. Oh, no, look, there's people like him that are still doing their thing. Yeah. So walking that balanced line between damned if you do and damned if you don't, this is a mainstream popular media platform. So you have to accept that environment for what it is. I'm not saying it's right that it is the way it is. I've often ranted about how it's controlled and structured in a deliberate way, etc. But it is what it is, and it's where the mass of the people pass through. So I know the chances are small that somebody will come across my channel by accident. Certainly in the last couple of years, the way they've changed the algorithms, I'm very much cul-de-saced, as they call it, shadow banned and cul-de-saced. So therefore the probabilities are very low, but I rely on the network of people, the loose association of people who have mostly agreement on a lot of topics, a lot of subjects, a lot of arguments, such that there is a word of mouth exchange. And I don't rely on YouTube to accurately or fairly, justly allow my content to propagate as if this was a totally neutral platform. I know that they don't. So I rely on word of mouth, in effect, the internet version of word of mouth. Somebody says, oh, have you seen this channel? Oh, have you listened to this? See this video? Look at this article, etc. That's the most common way that I've found a lot of really good information over the last few years since they began the changes, the major changes since about 2012. It was after they began bringing in the slowly creeping, gradualist process of restricting access to information on this platform in one way or another, constricting it and imposing more restrictions and more implied controls such that people self-censor. You get that chilling effect of, oh, you better not bring up that subject, otherwise you'll get kicked off. And for myself, because I don't do this as a method to make money, I'm not monetized. I don't in general ask for money. A few times I have because I've been desperate. Sometimes you got to ask for help. But I don't do this thing for money. So if they do kick me off, it's not as if I'm losing my livelihood, which for a lot of people, this is how they generate their income. So I don't have that effect hanging over my head, but I get the point that a lot of people are putting out good content that are making use a cliche, making a difference in terms of helping people in the general populace to have access to information and ideas and things like that. They are more and more restricted because of those implied controls. It's that chilling effect again. I've said it multiple times now. I think you get the point. So I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to shut my channel down. I'm not going to take any videos down unless I'm forced to by strikes and whatever the way that YouTube does. But I've seen other people posting and making comment about the fact that videos are being taken off their channel without them even being notified by YouTube. So now YouTube has basically taken the arbitrary position that if something flags up on your channel, they won't bother getting in touch with you and letting you know anymore. The thing will just be removed off your channel. So if they're going to do that, I ain't got to worry about whether there's any questions about any of my videos and whatever. I'll just come to the channel one day, look at the list and go, oh yeah, there's a few missing there. They've taken them down. I've got a copy of every video I upload onto YouTube. I don't use YouTube servers as my storage. Yeah, they are just copies. Whenever I do a live broadcast, I always record, I get a copy of the live broadcast. So I can re-upload them. I will re-upload all of the Sol Excalibre episodes onto BitChute in the coming weeks. At some point, I'll start just doing like one a day if I can, stuff like that. As long as my internet connection keeps going, I'll just keep, trickling them up there. That was a bit of a long rant about just the YouTube situation as it's playing. We'll see what happens in the coming week. I mentioned earlier, some people have shut their channels down by choice, maybe to just make a point or maybe to act as bait again to lure people onto other platforms. I'm not saying don't use other platforms. I'm just saying don't leave here until they push you out, unless you really want to. But obviously it's your choice. But I would suggest that the whole purpose of this gradual censorship process that they've been rolling out for the last year plus is that it's better for them that you go away by choice. Because if they have to force you out, then they reveal themselves as a tyranny, which gives them bad PR and blah, blah, blah. As it is at the moment, the PR over this latest censorship wave has basically initiated an exodus from YouTube anyway. And a lot of people are going, right, okay, forget YouTube now, let's just post to other platforms. And certainly dependent on the content they're outputting, most of their content now can't go on YouTube anymore because YouTube will just stop it straight away. It either won't publish in the first place or as soon as it goes up, it will get taken down. So they're putting their main content on other platforms. We'll see how it goes. I'll see how it rolls out. And I'm curious to see what they'll do with a channel like mine, because of the fact that, they can't exactly say there's nothing on the channel. I know there's not as many videos as there are on a lot of other people's channels, but there's quite a few videos there. So they can't say that, I'm not exactly providing content, but I'm not monetized. So unless they can come up with some bullshit reason as why they're allowed to put adverts on my channel, as a company, they can use that as a plausible deniability to say, oh, yeah, we're a private company, therefore we can change the rules however we like. And they could say something like, well, just because you don't monetize, we as a company want to use that space that you're taking up as advertising space, so you get adverts on your channel anyway. Tush it. Changes like that might happen. But I'm curious to see what they do with a channel like mine, because there are literally hundreds of thousands of channels like mine that are not massive. They're not got tons and tons of stuff on them, but they're there providing information and adding into that flow of the exchange of information and ideas. And they're a resource for the general populace to access, as long as they've got connection to the internet and access to YouTube. To me, that was the whole idea of being a library of information and ideas and opinion. Yeah, opinions are there as well. But the system doesn't want that anymore. In the new style of reality, in the new paradigm, all information will be controlled and monitored. Yeah. So, anyway, let me, after me 20 minutes rant, we'll see what happens. Let's have a quick scroll down the chat. Say hello to everyone. Super Leads, hello. And Cardini, hello, hello. Thanks for joining in, guys. Lots of Tathro, hello. Oh, that's you with your new avatar, Gary. That confused me for a minute there. I think, oh, who's that with the... I haven't seen that picture before. Scrolling down. I know I saw the names. Uni Black Sister, hello. Hope you're all right. New Being, hello, hello. Michael Allen, hello. I'll move my cursor, it'll be quicker if I just grab the scroll bar and drag it. That works better. It doesn't fade out as easy. Scrolling. Committed Escaper, hello. That come up, I saw in a video the other day again, people talking about the word hello. And it's like, why do you want to say hell to people? And it's like, no, it's hell low. Hell low, putting it down. Andy Manchester, hello. Every time you say hello, you're making hell go down. Get down there. Get down, ship. Neo Dog, hello. But, yeah, I think the whole idea of the confusion created by a lot of the strangeness in the English language has just been amplified now to such a degree that it creates hurdles for people that they just trip over constantly. The open-minded skeptic, hello. It's good to be skeptical. Just please don't be pathologically skeptical. I'm scrolling down. Paula B, hello. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're well. And I'm telling you, I'm scrolling down. Blazing Stars, hello. I feel like I always, well, not always, but most of the time, just like a radio DJ, you have to fill in the air gaps. Otherwise, people get distracted and their mind starts to think about other things that they could be doing. It's like, why am I listening to this? It's chuntering. I thought that was good when Bojo got accused of chuntering. But that was just political circus theatre crap that's happened over the recent week. And there's been tons of that. I can't be asked going over it as we wait for the election. Right, I think I scrolled all the way down the chat box now. Hello to everyone. Thanks for joining in the chat box. As I say nearly every week now, it's there for you to make use of. It's not a requirement. If you just like to sit and watch and not say anything, that's cool. But thank you to the people that do join in the chat. It adds another layer of communication that people have access to. So, yeah, chuntering Bojo. He's good at chuntering, at bamboozology. I think that might have been what his degree was in when he left school, bamboozology. Right, just to mention the main thing I wanted to mention tonight is back to Prince Andy again. I know I'm bringing up that subject again. And I think it's a very valid point that the media seems hell-bent on putting this subject in front of the in front of the public again and keeping it there. They want the general populace looking at this. They want the general populace talking about this. I've had questions put to me by people that normally wouldn't be interested in this kind of information that are fairly, you know, to use the phrase in a non-derogatory fashion, but they're very much still in the matrix. You know, they're happily going about their day, living their life, doing their thing, like most people are, a lot of people are. But I've had people in that kind of frame of mind turn and ask me and say, well, what the hell's going on with this Prince Andrew thing? This is crazy. This is like some kind of tinfoil hat conspiracy shit, but it's real. It's like, yeah. And it's easy to fall into a sort of, yeah, I told you so. Yeah, and that gets a bit demeaning because it makes you feel like, you know, why weren't you listening in the first place? And you get into that kind of emotional master-servant process with somebody. There's a lot of things I don't know. There's a lot of things that people don't know in general. And when you find them out, you have to basically go, oh, shit, I wish I'd knew that before, but you didn't. But now you do know it. So you move forward from now that you do know it. It's easy enough to fool people, but it's harder to tell them that they've been fooled, to paraphrase a famous quote by, was Mark Twain, wasn't it? Yeah. It's easier to fool people than to tell them that they've been fooled or convince them that they've been fooled. So this Prince Andrew story hasn't gone away. It's carried on over the week, even though it's reduced a little bit to a simmer. You know, they're nicely simmering it in the background. But there's now another witness that has come forward saying that he had been seen with the main girl in question, the main woman in question, the main accuser. So it's not going away. If anything, it's like the crack in the dam is dribbling, and slowly the pressure is building and the pressure is building. And that's what inclined me again to point at this subject and go, this looks like they're adding more kindling onto the fire deliberately. And then that had me thinking about the prince himself being the phoenix egg. I know that sounds a bit weird. Yeah, sometimes my mind works in odd connections or in a kind of symbolic fashion. If the prince is the egg and they're baking that egg, ready to get it to crack and open, a lot of things have occurred this year, and I thought about doing a laundry list based on my notes of all the shows for this year and going through, pointing out all the major things that have occurred through this year. And I'm not suggesting every episode I've done has been there's been a major event, a major news thing happening that we've been talking about. It's not every week like that, but there has been consistently a releasing of information that's built up and built up and built up, certainly in this last year, leading up to this end of the year period. And it's been part of what has led me to that Phoenix hypothesis that I've been banging on about for most of the year. 2018 and into 2019, there seemed to be this push of revelation. I'm not implying a religious meaning to that. I just mean in a great revealing, like the word apocalypse means. There has been a great revealing of many things to the general populace. There may not be necessarily the whole and complete truth, but there have been many parts of truth released, and many singular truths that when you put them all together, you can start connecting the dots and see how things work in stepping stone fashion from one thing to the next. And I don't believe that this is all just pure coincidence. I'm not a coincidence theorist. So I don't think the majority of these things have been occurring just by happenstance, or it's just the modern age, mate. So go back 20 years when the internet was really pretty much truly free, when you could post pretty much anything you wanted near enough. The access to the information then was far more open. There was a lot more revealing going on in that respect. The available information at your fingertips was a lot more direct. But now this has become a controlled burn, in the same way as potentially a lot of those fires in Australia, in Brazil, that they've been setting and then saying, oh, climate change, look at all the fire everywhere. So hang on, didn't those people set those fires? So it wasn't the climate causing the fires, the people setting the fire. They have been building this fire, building this pyre. I know it's a bit esoteric, but the 19 represents the two ends, the two polarities working together in conjunction. It's like the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. The 1 and the 9 equals the beginning and the end, the beginning and the culmination, but it's not the end. The cycle then transforms into another cycle. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, the geometria of the word phoenix equals a 10, 1, 0. So it resolves back to 1 again, but it's not 1 from nothing. So it's come from the 0, if that makes sense. So the 1 to 9 is the process of the creation and building of that phoenix egg. The 0, when you get to the completion of the decimal system, the 10, or for us, what would be 2020, the 20 will be the culmination of that process. So the 19, and why I've been saying this year is the year of the Phoenix, because there's been a convergence of many different agendas and narratives that have reached a transition point during this year. They may not be completed or culminated, but they may have reached a point such that it's like the change of chapter. So they're now beginning a further rollout of the next phase, the next stepping stone. And I do think that this process that has been occurring with what mainly began with the Epstein case, but there's stepping stones that go further back from that and connect to other things as well. But in terms of what the media has been presenting to the general populace, it's that Epstein case linchpin. That was like the fulcrum point that begins the descending curve. From their point of view anyway. The fire is set and now they've got to wait for it to build energy or descend into destruction, into consumption. They fed that Epstein process into the public. They manipulated it. We certainly haven't been told everything. Of course, they're not going to present everything. If there was ever going to be a case against him, then they can't, because certain details would have to have been kept for the case itself. Can't talk about those things in public. It could jeopardize the case. But then we get to that moment when he supposedly kills himself, and Epstein didn't kill himself. We get to that moment, and then, well, it doesn't matter if you talk about it now, because you can't have a case against him because he's dead. So now they can really, really manipulate the available information that goes out into the public, because none of the details are ever going to be properly scrutinized as if they would be in a court case where the details could be questioned and cross-examined, etc. No, it doesn't matter now. So now they can just chuck out loads of crap and feed the narrative and corrupt it and pollute it and cover whatever truth was there in piles of conjecture and salacious gossip and blah. Meanwhile, the general populace is left in a state of PTSD from what is basically, even though it's vicariously, it's a proxy effect, suffering PTSD as if they'd had some kind of sexual trauma against them in childhood. Because the more details come out, the more it's revealed that this isn't just crazy conspiracy theory that you can put to the back of your mind because it's just some weird people out there on the internet that think people in power do these nasty stuff in the back. No, here's some evidence. Here's some more evidence. Here's some more evidence. Here's some more evidence. Here's some more evidence. They want the public to know that this is how the systems of control operate. Why do they want the public to know that this is how the systems operate? So that the public demand that those systems change. So that when they bring in the New World Order, the public will go, oh, yeah, it's very, very good. We're glad you sorted out this terrible corruption, all this nastiness, yeah. So the slaves willingly vote for the new version, the new rebuilt version of the prison system, of the cage, of the panopticon that they've been persuaded doesn't exist. So do you think this Prince Andrew situation, case, narrative, agenda, call it various labels, it's not something that can be totally ignored as if it's just like, well, we should have known that, this stuff happens. People in power do bad things when they've got that much power available to them. That's normalizing the whole thing. And if anything, that then justifies the system carrying on with those processes. Because if the public's just going to shrug their shoulders and go, oh, well, it's like gambling. It's the luck of the draw whether your child is the virgin chosen to feed the dragon. put your names in the hat. Is your lot drawn out? Your tough shit, mate. Your kids get eaten. At least the rest of us are all right. At least the status quo is still okay. I can still go down the shops and buy the tat that they tell me makes my life better. So what? Your kid's dead. I don't care. But also, it perpetuates the trauma effect upon the public so that they can be psychologically manipulated and gaslit and given effects such as learned helplessness, because they will react in a way to, oh, well, at least it's not my kid. I can't change the world. It is what it is. We've got to feed the dragon every now and then. So, can't have not people in power. There can't be nobody in power. Otherwise, everything could fall to shit. All the usual kind of cliches that they've been given by the very controllers, the authorities, the mafia in uniforms, that have persuaded them that you're better off having us, the mafia, because, if you didn't have us, think of all the horrible people out there that would come and get you. It's a protection racket on a global scale, but it is still a protection racket. So I do think it is an important thing that has been played out over this year, involving the very core of how the system maintains its structure of the power hierarchy. Because those at the top have something to hold over those below them so that they can manipulate them and keep the whole structure upright and operating the way it does. Paedophilia and other forms of extreme abuses of power over others is the core of what keeps the whole thing going. And the more that people realize that, the more they want to turn away from it. The system and the controllers know that very well. So they know that if they don't get ahead of the curve, they will be pulled down. So as Stalin said it very well, if you're going to have an opposition, it's better to lead the opposition. So they started this process. They're the ones that create the destruction, create the chaos so that it causes destruction. Because if you're ahead of the curve and you're the one creating the chaos, then you're the one that knows how the chaos was created. Therefore, you can solve it in an instant, which means you look like the holy hero saving the day and bringing in the new security of the new order. So they need at the moment the public to be demanding further investigation and basically the pulling down of that power structure that is known as the British monarchy in the UK. This is just part of how it's been presented to the population of the UK. What is happening here with the situation around the royals affects the global situation as well, because it's all interconnected, as well as that family having influence and power over the global situation. But they're mainly using it against the UK public at the moment more than anything, because we've been I know this sounds big-headed and I'm saying we as if I did any of this crap. I didn't, but the British Empire has been the equivalent of the Roman Empire of the past up until 100 years ago, and then it was deliberately brought down again. For the last 100 years, the American Empire has been the dominant world empire, and it's had its 100 years now, so it's been brought down. There will be a new empire for a good while, but I think really where they're trying to push it to is to make it a singular global system, so global empire, and we'll just have the facade, the 1984 style facade of a fake war of terror that goes on forever between us and some shadowy random figures that we never encounter that supposedly live on the other side of the valley. The usual kind of fear of the other, and don't worry about it. Our military will go over there and deal with them, and you never see any actual direct evidence or truth about what is occurring. Wagging the dog, totally. But it's important for them to get the mass of the populace to change their own thinking and to willingly give up certain institutions that were considered to be the sources of the order that made them feel safe and contented, and that they could go about their daily life doing their thing and blah, blah, blah. The British monarchy has been part of that order. They call it the British Parliament, but it's the Queen's Parliament. The whole structure relies on that process of symbolic representations of authority. So the royal family has occupied a position that is a symbolic representation of authority, even if the majority of the populace don't get that concept. They just see it as, oh yeah, they're the royals, they make the laws, they're the good people, they look after us, they're like the family of the nation. They're just a bunch of people that have been given these titles. There's nothing that makes them special in any separate way. Some people will argue whether they're truly human or not, but I think that's a separate conversation. So I think it's very relevant as to what's happening in this change of the paradigms, shifting into a new age, a new world order, a single global system that is reliant on the British monarchy basically being put into the past. The new royals will probably take over positions, ceremonial positions that are similar to what's occurred over the last 100+ years, but they're not going to be as influential as the royal family ever was. The Queen ruled over the Commonwealth, which was in effect the modern version of the British Empire. It supposedly wasn't as grand and powerful as the great empire of Victoria, but I would argue that it was. If anything, it was more fucking powerful. It's just that it wasn't as grandiose and as in your face directly. But it was still there, and it was still dominating global activity. It didn't disappear. The Commonwealth countries didn't just suddenly become independent and start their own path in the international community. So if they want the public to give up and say they've had enough of the royal family, they need to be pulled down, what better way of doing it as revealing all these truths about them? And I'm not in any way trying to defend them and say that we should keep them and that they're great, and not at all. I'm trying to make observations about the use of propaganda and the manipulation of information and truth, such that it enables a narrative to steer the public's thinking so that they support and desire and ask for changes in their society that will enable and reinforce this new style dystopia, technocratic dystopia, that the system wants to impose on us all. The whole idea of divine right to rule and the institution of the aristocracy bloodlines and the monarchies, I disagree with. I think it's all bunkum. I do not believe in the divine right to rule. So I'm quite happy. I'm looking forward to how this plays out in some ways, because more of this truth is being revealed to the public, so more people will see it for what it is, a system of control, not a genuine group of people, a family that really, really truly cares about the population as people. They don't give a fuck. They might give a fuck in the sense that they're worried that you'll want to do harm to them, or you'll want to take all their glittery stuff away and things like that. old Philip used to talk about wanting to be a bacteria so he could kill off most of the population. Why is he so afraid of the population? It's like Custer's last stand. He knows that once people realize what kind of being he truly is, they're going to want to come and get him. That, and they're going to eat all the cake and there'll be none left for him. All that kind of mindset, the psychopathic mindset that has been bred into the majority of the aristocracy. That's another big long topic where you could talk about the inbreeding across the centuries between all these bloodlines, such that it's quite easy to list the definitions of what makes a sociopath or a psychopath. You know, pretty much all of them is a tick, 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 tick. You know, pick any one of the royal families and you'll find those attributes just stand out about them. So where do we go from this point? If that is the process they're trying to play out, if they have been deliberately building this, I know I'm being a bit poetic like I often am with use of language, but they've been building this pyre to stick the phoenix egg on, and then they keep dropping kindling onto that to keep building the flame, building the flame, building the flame. I am speculating and I'm projecting into the future, but I could see one of two things happening. The Queen will die, could happen easily within the next few years, even within the next year. And if that happens, it could cause a major shake-up to ripple through the whole family, the whole royal family structure and the institution of the monarchy as it stands. Or this process of revealing the interconnected network of human trafficking and abuse will be more revealed, and the public clamour for it to be addressed in some way will get so powerful that they'll have to do something about it. And then there will be some kind of shake-up enforced on the monarchy, and some of their powers may get stripped away, things like that. But it's definitely going to change in some fashion. I'm not pessimistic to the degree that I think the populace will just keep putting up with it as it gets worse and worse and worse. As I mentioned earlier, you know, I've had people that are fairly, you know, normal, as they say, asking me about this, because it's like they can't avoid it. The press is deliberately putting it in front of them. They want them to know. A lot of this information has been known about for many years, some of it for decades, and it was there available for you to find out about. I mentioned earlier as well about that kind of golden age of the internet where information was much more freely available, and a lot of the evidence and connections to people like Epstein I found out about thanks to the internet and that availability of exchange of information. So they can't plug the hole in the dam anymore. Yeah, the hole is too big for the little boy's fingers to fit anymore, so he can't plug that dam anymore. It's going to break eventually, and when the levee breaks, they're going to be there with their lifeboats pretending that, you know, they can save us all from this chaos that's just happened by pure coincidence of these bits of information being revealed about the royal family and other powerful people. No, this is them revealing how it works, and they've gamed it such that either the public will just accept it and, you know, it'll carry on as it is, or the public will demand a change, and in that process of change they get the opportunity to install their new paradigm, their new order. So you've got to walk that fine line between fueling their agendas and their bullshit and their manipulations and not falling into complete chaos. But somewhere in between those two Hegelian extremes, hopefully we can find a middle ground where that how can I describe that? Old boys network. It's not, to me, that just doesn't really demonstrate how nasty and evil this shit is. But that centuries old institution of these power control structures that utilize things like abuse to control people, that then gives them the so-called authority to rule over the masses. Right? That needs to be dealt with, changed, preferably, move on from that old way of doing things. But like I keep saying recently, we've got to see how it plays out, see how things happen, make changes in your own life, make changes in your own way of being, and see how that ripples out. Keep those connections going such that the ripple effect passes from one to another to another. Yeah. Just because they're wanting to control all the information on the internet doesn't mean you should just give up and walk away. You can if you want, but you are in effect giving them what they want, and it's not going to stop them pumping their propaganda out. They'll be quite happy that you've fucked off, because now they've got all your audience as well. Don't give them the satisfaction, and at the same time don't get played into serving their method. Let the public see that they are doing this kind of stuff on YouTube. Let the public know that this kind of stuff is happening, because it will sink in and plant little seeds here and there. Eventually it will sink in more and more as this information comes out, as these revelations occur. More and more people will start going, hang on a minute, last week they were telling us it was this, and now this other evidence has come out. There's no way that's coincidence, mate. Fuck off. I'm not that much of a coincidence theorist. Anyway, that was mainly all I wanted to rant about. I know I'm repeating the Prince Andrew stuff again, but with that new witness stepping forward, it's like they're really piling it on now.
Well, it needs to be exposed, Cookie, doesn't it? It needs to be talked about still, I think. It's still important to mention it.
Yeah, and to me, it's very much so. It's important to mention it because they are trying to appropriate the conversation and make sure that people get the misinformation and the disinformation, so that it becomes all about like, oh, Epstein was the guy, just like they did with Savile. Once Savile died, it was like, oh, that's it, all done, folks, nothing to see here anymore, move on. And they're trying to do the same thing now with Epstein, and in a connected way, Andrew. Put all the blame on him, or put all the blame on the woman, what's her name, Ghislaine, and she can't be found, so therefore what can we do about it, folks? She did it all, but now she's run away.
Yeah, and people, like say, see it all, and it's interesting how the royal family will go forward, or the monarchy, like you mentioned. Will they be stepping aside slightly, maybe not having a king queen type thing, and some, was it prince regents or whatever they call themselves, or they're not exactly a king or queen. Maybe that's the route they'll take. Maybe nobody wants it anymore because of all the what people know about it now, the awareness of society about this setup and about how all this operates, and the dark shadows as have been revealed, the expose, it's all come out. The crumbling empire, as you mentioned, it's crumbling away more than ever these days, it seems, and people can see the truth.
They have to refresh it every so often.
Yeah,
I know this is something I said this over the year in other episodes, talking about that Phoenix effect, the Phoenix Gate, and how they use the methodology of persuading people to have a revolution, but they're then the ones that control what happens after the revolution. So in effect, they just get you to burn down your own house so that then you can pay them again to build you a new house. Yeah, they do it every 100 years or so, 90 plus years, 3 generations, I think it's based on.
I tell you, I've noticed one thing with watching that comedy channel and watching the left-right paradigm. That's broken now because of the left. Because people point to the left and they say, oh, it's not just left-wing politics. Look, these people lead into the United Nations. And once you do that, it's easy as pie to just jump across and say, oh, the right wing lead into that as well. And that is what has woken a lot of people up. The fact that the New World Order has been linked through to the left wing politics. That's broken the left right divide for a lot of people. I think
as well that there's I might just be describing the same thing as you, basically. I was thinking about the way the majority of the parties, the majority of politics has been drawn into the centre, which in some ways could be argued that they're reacting to public demands, and the public wants something that's more in the middle and not on an extreme right or left. But also in doing so, by bringing it into that dead middle ground, then you get more situations such as hung parliaments or alliances have to be formed. And you can look all across Europe and see that effect in nearly every country. And now here in the UK, we're in our third election within the space of a few years. And the situation with this latest election looks exactly like that. All the parties, apart from maybe the Brexit and whatever, because they're deliberately standing on a main point, just that point, but the two main parties certainly are almost identical. So they're both, they're all squished trying to fight over the middle ground, and in doing so there isn't really one party or the other that anyone wants to fucking vote for.
I think that's part of what the Tories are aiming for, because I was looking at the polls earlier on, and the Brexit party has just dropped off, so all their support has gone to the Tories, who are strong on Brexit. Oh, we'll bring you Brexit for sure. And so it's beginning to look like they're going to beat Labour. But, I mean, you can't trust the polls in the same way you can't trust 20% of the election votes anymore, yeah? They'll rig it if they can. So, yeah, I mean, the left-right politics is happening. Something else I've noticed is somebody put in the other day in a comment on the Corbett report, or it might be like that 2030, yeah? And he's saying how that the crop losses and the food shortages are really going to be evident next year. Now, I mean, I know it's in his interest a little bit to try and pump up the fear factor. Yeah, whether it's next year or 10 years, it's much better for him if it's kind of like next year. But something else somebody just mentioned was North Africa, and a lot of the African immigration is being pushed to clear Africa for farming land. So they're being pushed, which was something that, it kind of occurred to me that, they're doing that in Africa. I mean, China built a major road through the Sahara. But the fact that there's immigrants here as part of that plan, wow, yeah. I think
it should be classed as land clearances, because it's a global scale version of what happened in a lot of certainly the European countries at the beginning of the last century. Yeah, when they started bringing in, like in the UK, they were bringing in things like the Enclosure Acts, well, it's more than a couple of centuries ago. But that process of them taking away common land from the general populace, but also it's that effect of them dominating and monopolising the agricultural land and the agricultural industry that feeds the populace. They're doing the same thing now, but on a global scale, where they're carrying out land clearances, where if people are lucky, they get offered money to buy their land, but a lot of people are basically just getting shot at and told to go away.
Yeah, well, two things. Firstly, on the nowadays front, True Stream Media, they did a big thing about Extinction Rebellion, and they did mention a case where a charity has bought some land in Uganda to grow trees, and they kicked 20,000 people off their land. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm thinking, that's not going to be trees in 5 years' time. Yeah, they're going to clear them and start planting food.
Or it'd be palm trees so they can make palm oil.
Yeah, but you see, when you talk about the land clearances in England, I've been thinking about this before, yeah? Every time you read that geezer stank of dope, man. Fucking, we've got a fucking good might run out and see if he's selling me. It's fucking smell is so strong in here. Anyway, but also, where was I? It fucking knocks my head off. The smell was so strong. But you go land clearances, around that time. You read any of the popular books from that time, and everybody who had a country estate was in debt. They was playing cards, they were getting into debt in London, they owed money to the money lenders, and the money lenders had only just opened up the slave trade to America. And who was selling all the slaves? Who was running all the slave markets in America? The same people as the money lenders. And now they wanted to open up factories everywhere, and they needed people to work those factories, to work the cotton that had come from the slaves sold by the money lenders to local places in South America. So there's a bigger picture even in those days. Yeah, there were people. I mean, if you look at the journey of Christopher Columbus to South America, there was a whole tribe of people in Spain who the Spanish Inquisition said, either you convert to Christianity or we're going to persecute you. So they all converted to Christianity, but they weren't really Christians. 6 of them went with Christopher Columbus because to finance the trip, he had to borrow money. Isabella had to borrow money from the money lenders. So there were 6 representatives of debt firms from the tribe going with Columbus. Yeah, how much of the silver ended up in their pockets, I don't know. So there, this global network, it's existed for hundreds of years. Yeah, they're taking money in one place and sending the slave goods to another place, England. So basically, our ancestors were kicked off the land because possibly a lot of the landowners had gotten into debt with the money lenders.
Yeah. After the Napoleonic Wars, I think really that kick up in the industrial revolution, but the kick up in most of the European nations really, getting into gear of mass production via industrialization, and that was a major step in globalization.
Let's not forget.
You could add in the rise of the bankers like Rothschild and whatever. It was all at that time mainly.
Absolutely, because let's not forget who took advantage of the Battle of Waterloo by giving fake news about who'd won. So everybody was selling their shares like crazy because the man from Rothschild had come to London and said, "Oh my God, Napoleon's won! Napoleon's won!" Then he was buying up all the shares cheap.
Yeah.
So
and a lot of people were. To use another kind of sort of correlation or analogy, it's very similar to the dot-com bubble. The age of shipping had got to a stage where they could reliably move large amounts of goods and people all across the world. So there was this opportunity for people who had a bit of wealth, like the royals, but also the rest of the aristocracy, especially the landed aristocracy. They had an opportunity to invest in this new globalized infrastructure. So there was like a dot-com bubble rush, like a gold rush. So people borrowed to invest in doing things like buying a plantation in Virginia and opening up a cotton factory in the north of England somewhere. So yeah, absolutely. It was, I think, definitely a major stepping stone in the globalization effect, not only of resource trade and production, but also finances. I think primarily in finances. The global banks really started to take hold then. And
it's all about, it's the power, isn't it? Power, profit, greed, lots of slaves to do all your hard, horrible work to make you lots more money. And when you step outside and say, I'm not doing it, they send in the dogs, the soldiers or whatever, the army, and shoot you. We've seen that over the hundreds of years. People have been sort of stepping up and saying, we're not doing this anymore, or we want a fairer piece of the cake. We want a bit more, a bit more respect and that. And no, you just get hammered back.
And what happened in Manchester is the people actually did start to get together. There were so many people trying to make money out of them that they were able to actually ask for a decent wage. Loads of people would put a penny in a week to buy scientific publications and books for libraries, all organised by the people themselves. And then you've got George Bernard Shaw coming in and saying, the working classes are much too stupid to organise themselves. We'll have to do it for them. And that's exactly where Marx went as well. Yeah, Karl Marx, the big centrist friend of the bankers, he went to Manchester as well to organise the people because they were getting a little bit too organised by themselves. So
it's almost a a repetition, or recently there was a repetition. Is his name Stanley, I think? Boris Johnson's dad. I saw a clip. He was on some news program. I think it was one of the BBC news programs, and he was complaining about how the British public are too dumb to be able to know the word Pinocchio and how to spell it, because basically none of us read. We're all illiterate dumbos. And you saying that, and I thought that sounds just like what he was saying on the TV the other day.
PINOCCHIO.
Right,
I think that's right.
Thank you. I can't remember. It was just the point of him saying, basically reiterating that narcissistic aristocracy attitude of the rest of the public are all dumb, animals, so they don't know any better, therefore we've got to rule over them. It's exactly the same fucking statement.
Like 10 years at a public school education was actually born into him. All of that education, all those advantages was like actually born to it. There's an angel when you're reincarnated standing saying he's special, we're going to make him rich, and that won't stick, we're going to give him to a poor family. No, it doesn't work like that.
I think the programming though of like the narcissism in society's got more and more intense, especially with the way the communication internet and all that's set up now, and everyone can, I think there'll always be narcissistic elements in people, but it seems to be more and more. You see that much more. I've seen so many people I've realized in my life how many of them are actually pure narcissists, and there's a few I've met and still know now, but it's like it's there, and then society can, the way it's geared for the profit and greed and competition and all the rest of it, that's the sort of way people are encouraged to sort of act and behave, and then they become it's not them, it's just it's a caricature of themselves or whatever, and they we have all a breakdown and everything else, people getting more and more prescribed help from the government and the pharmaceutical ways and everything else, and that's on the rise, and this is, I think, coping mechanisms, and people realize they're not like that, or they have conflictions within themselves, so that creates all the problems externally around us. So it's a very deep thing. We could talk about this for quite some time. Something
also, I think you've got to be careful with the how to put it, try and describe what I'm thinking. I think some of the elements, such as the concept of narcissism, the very word itself, has been deliberately propagated. Certainly, you can quite easily go on YouTube, do a search for narcissism, and you will be saturated with big channel videos about what it is to be a narcissist, or them talking about somebody who's on TV who's a narcissist or whatever. It's become more commonly known about. The public's awareness of the concept of the psychological problem of narcissism has been made more, it's been spread more, so more people know of it. And the reason I say you should be aware of that and be careful about it is because it can be used in a very similar way to how many of the religions implant guilt into people and then use guilt against them. If they've given you this concept of narcissist, but then they want to impress upon you that the majority of people that you encounter are narcissists. And the definition of narcissist means you don't really care about anyone except yourself. You have very little or no empathy or compassion for others. So the majority of what you do, what you even think, is all geared around you. So in any situation, your primary concern will only be thinking about you and how you either benefit or lose from the situation, and why isn't everybody talking about you, and look at me, but all those kind of elements.
It goes down so many avenues though, Cookie, doesn't it? You can go into sociopathy and all these different elements of people's behavior and how they are and themselves, and what, and again, they want to put everyone on a scale anyway, as we know. That seems to be
give them a label to use against each other. So let's say you're looking at the population via an internet snapshot of, you know, what the people are generally talking about in chat rooms and stuff like that. You go, we're not seeing enough interpersonal conflict here. We need to separate them all into atomized themselves. How do you do that? Well, you persuade them that the majority of the population is filled with narcissists, so they will look for the traits that define narcissist, and you'll find them readily in the general population, because a lot of people, you know, everybody expresses a certain amount of these things, but it's when you have an overabundance of them that you're classified as a narcissist. Yeah, but the point is, they will then go about looking for that trait in other people and attacking it. So you begin an interpersonal conflict, and the other person will insist that I'm not a narcissist, and it begins a conflict between the two. At the same time, the definition implies, by its definition, that you only care about yourself. So it's a way of using guilt against you to make you agree to things that are part of a collective agenda. Yeah, so they want to bring in a collective agenda like Goethe and the Extinction Rebellion. The Extinction Rebellion people will use as an argument that, oh, you don't want to join in, you don't agree with what we're talking about because you're a narcissist. Perfect. Here you go. Here's your ammunition, folks. Shoot it at each other.
Morris Buck described the steps of consciousness going from a baby that, you know, only knows the world but can't communicate, to the terrible twos where everything's got to be me, me, me. That's narcissism. It's a 2-year-old. That's what they're doing. And one of the ways I think they've done this is by Gurdjieff and Spencer. They talk about the 2 laws that govern the universe, the law of 7 and the law of 3. And the law of 3 can represent many different things. And narcissism itself can be, like anything, it can be active or passive. And so that's what they've begged people. Are you going to be an active narcissist? Or are you just going to sit back and watch the narcissist being a passive narcissist? They've changed the triangles around. You see what I mean? To be the opposite of a narcissist once was to be a decent person that isn't selfish. But now they've got the people, if you don't want to be an active narcissist, well, just be a passive narcissist and watch the other narcissists. You know, they're changing the triangles around,
It's crazy.
Getting people to fit into them. But a lot of it is like just dumbing down. Dumb people down to the level of an emotional 2-year-old.
Infantilize them.
And all be narcissists.
When your average populace, and I know that many people find this offensive because you think you're directing at them personally, but we all have to do our own introspection and decide, you know, are there things about ourselves that we could improve on? Am I acting like an idiot or like a child? But when the mass of the population is at a remedial level of education and cognitive ability, and a lot of them, and a growing proportion of them, is worse than that. They are at an infantile stage of mental and emotional development. Then yes, mate, everywhere you look, you will find narcissists. Why? Because basically you're looking at the personality of a toddler. What you're interacting with is the personality of a 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old. So you experience narcissism from that person? Yeah, because that's their mentality at the moment. They are at that mental age that normally you would expect from a young child. Especially when the population is encouraged to be obsessed with their childhood. One of the common, I think I mentioned this I'm not sure if I said it on air, I think it might have been when we were chatting off air. One of the common tactics in this internet sphere is that they will encourage people to reminisce about their youth. Do you remember that TV show that was on such and such and whatever? Because it drags people's thinking back into a childlike state. It elicits emotions. Do you remember how good you felt when you experienced your first Christmas, or the first memories you've got of your first Christmas? Do you remember how joyful you felt? They elicit emotions. So they take people's thinking into their emotional core, which can be a good thing. You know, somebody's down in the dumps, you help them remember things they're grateful for by, again, prodding at memories, encouraging the remembrance of things that people have enjoyed so that you raise their spirits. But at the same time, the media can be used to constantly pull people back down. It's like, don't start thinking about that kind of stuff. No, just think about how much you love bubblegum. Do you remember how great bubblegum was? Wasn't it fucking brilliant? Hey, bubblegum.
And do you remember how sucking on the titty and then it'd go dry is like having to just scroll through your phone, until you suck really hard and you can get a bit more milk.
Well, it's really evil as well, because at the same time it also creates depression in people in a subtle way, because it keeps taking you back, and by doing that you do create depression. Just as much as you look too far forward, you create anxiety. So you've got to get it in balance, or at least recognize that for what it is and see that's what they're doing to you. Maybe why people feel, like fucking hell, because everything you seem to be pummeled with, it seems, is that sort of stuff, that sort of back catalogue stuff. It doesn't seem to have, in anything they move forward with, it seems very little, as in the mainstream movies, music, TV, that sort of thing, seems to be repeated stuff for the past 30 to 40 years. Recycled in some shape or form. So interesting how they manipulate that. And so, and look at the stats on depression again. We're not lying. These things, I mean, why is it that that's the way? All these things play a role. They all have a little, like I say, plant little seeds, and they grow, and you become more depressed and more fucked off with the world and everything else. So they do it deliberately on us, and that's what
I've used this example before. When I watch the fucking politicians on TV saying the same bullshit, saying the same lies, that makes me depressed. So when people say like, "Oh, you're looking a bit depressed," it's like, I just fucking watch some arsehole politician on the TV and it's pissed me off. Yeah.
Well, I've said this before, but I think the LSD generation, which is my generation, it was, too much of the information was sticking. They've been doing a bit of inner work. So they gave everybody ecstasy, which means you have a really good night, but you can't remember what it is to be loved up. You can't remember 10 years down the road. And that's where a lot of the depression was coming from, I've seen a lot of people. I mean, 5 years ago, I was seeing people talking about, I did all this ecstasy, 10 years ago. Now I'm just depressed going to the doctor. That kind of hyped up activity, something ought to stick from that. All the time I was doing LSD, I was thought, this is consciousness, but it's not how consciousness is going to be, because it's too hyped up. But there was something about it that was right. I was getting something right.
It was the serotonin. MDMA connects with the serotonin connectors primarily, so it just gives you an overwhelming sense of goodness, of well-being, of happiness, of contentment, of enjoyment. It's the good feeling connectors.
Nothing to do with the election then. No.
give Bojo some LSD. Let's see what happens when he's on Andrew Marr, and see if he chunters more.
Well, I did see Boris in a fish shop in, where was it? In Grimsby.
There's a guy works down the chip shop, swears he's Elvis.
Yeah. Everywhere he's been going, he's just been getting heckled, and lots of people not very welcoming. I'm not sure about Corbyn, but Corbyn's being destroyed in the tabloids at the moment. He's a monster.
He gets the same kind of reception everywhere he goes. Apart from his entourage, if you see him when he's having, public interactions, most people don't want to fucking know him either.
No, everyone's just like, piss off.
Well, on the good side, the Green Party vote has completely dropped off, and you see it go up during the summer when Extinction Rebellion were doing all their really, very visible protests. But now it's dropped off. So is the Green vote. So perhaps they shouldn't have. Perhaps they shouldn't have gone along with that. I noticed Mark Windows was talking about the guy that's standing in Totnes, who I don't 100% trust, Kitnes. But what happened down there, Kitson.
That was something I was dubious about his last podcast from yesterday. I noticed Annie Logical had posted some comments underneath it. I'm glad she did, because I was thinking, oh, you're letting the guy talk as if you accept him as some kind of authority, but he's no.
Yeah, I'm glad about that, because Kitson is, you know, he doesn't care too much about the truth. I think he's interested in himself. But even so, what was happening was kind of indicative that the Green Party were funding this night for Green voters, and what should they vote instead of Green? Because Green doesn't stand a fucking chance. But they wouldn't let him speak. And in the end, he did get up on the stage and speak because he had a handful of people there supporting him. Yeah, he wasn't like so many YouTubers that go into meetings and they want confrontation, or they're all on their own. Yeah, he had a handful of people there saying, let him on the stage, let him speak. But yeah, I wouldn't trust Kitson 100%. Interestingly, Nubian asked me what I thought about the election. And this is the chart for the election, yeah, where you've got the full moon, yeah, pretty much in a quincunx, I think it's called, yeah, between Pluto and Saturn, but you've got Venus right in the middle of it as well, splitting them apart, yeah.
Right.
And then you've also got Jupiter, which is in a really good aspect to Uranus. So I'm thinking Jupiter and Venus are more the Labour signs, and Saturn and Pluto are more the staunch conservative, yeah. So yeah, so anyway, I'm just thinking that might, you know, point to a Labour win.
I would have thought the Jupiter was more appropriate for a Conservative and Saturn for Labour, because Labour's often the party of change. You know, they almost always, whenever they get into power, they start changing what the Conservatives had put in place when they were in power. You know, Jupiter's is a conservative. It protects us from, supposedly, allegedly, you know, protects us from random asteroids and comets and stuff like that. That's why I'm thinking it's got that kind of conservative effect.
Well, it's a feminine power that kind of tries to harmonise everything. Let's all be one big happy family. Whereas Saturn is more your law and order.
Yeah.
So, but you know, I think with Jupiter as well, being let's all harmonise, let's all be happy. With Uranus, which is supposed to be a big magnifier, I thought that might make a difference there, yeah. Whereas Mars, which is more your conservative, yeah, because they're for the army and all that, is in a conjunction there with Neptune, which is the dreamer. So, you know, this could be the end of Labour's dreams. It could put the whole Labour vote, the whole Tory vote into the dream world. All Jeremy Corbyn has to do to win this election is come out and say, I will definitely see Brexit through. And then where are the Remainer voters going to go? They can't go anywhere else. Yeah?
He's already made a categorical statement saying he will have another vote.
Well, then he wants to lose, yeah, because he knows it. Because that referendum was really, you know, down to people's toes. They voted in a way that they're not going to change, yeah.
But so, I think it's in that respect, it's pointless arguing over what they're promising to do, because these are election promises. They're as good as like a fart in a colander. Yeah, they ain't going to go anywhere or do anything. They're just spouting whatever crap. Like today, Bojo was talking about getting rid of the TV license fee. And he's saying this just after, or not long after, BBC announced their BBC Prime service. So if you're really, really dumb, you'll not only pay for a TV license, you'll also pay for a subscription to BBC Prime. So they're charging you again. Are you mad? What the fuck are you? You know, I think Bojo's taking the PR opportunity of talking about scrapping the TV license because they are more than likely going to switch to a subscription service. So he's not promising to give anything that's likely to have not happened in the first place, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
They're just promising anything. Yeah. Like I said the other, I'm not sure, last week, you know, taking the piss, saying Corbyn was promising that cats would be living with dogs and dogs living with cats, and you know, he's promising everything and anything.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. It's only how many days away? So Thursday, this election.
Yeah,
Wow.
Thursday. So
I wonder
3
if
days.
5 people turn up in Wales, 10 in Scotland, 20 in England. They should be able to form a government out of that, isn't it? Maybe.
Yeah. It would certainly be appropriate to the amount of support that they've got statistically in the population.
Yeah. Well, I think I just think the whole nation. I mean, it'd be interesting just to see the turnout if they'll be honest about it. Let's just see.
Let's not forget, if it falls below 50%, they don't have a mandate. So their first priority always is to have controversy between the two sides to get people out voting.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why they've been pushing crap like the lover of Bojo, you know, that woman that was on all the different TV shows saying how she wouldn't talk about their affair and what, like you say, controversy to get people engaged in the political process and then debating over who they're going to vote for and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They're desperate now to get people back in on it. You know, this is the third election within the space of something like 2+ years or just over 2 years.
Yeah, it is, yes.
So they know the public is pissed off. They know the public in general is fed up with the whole thing and think that they're all a bunch of jokers. So they've got to desperately try and get that 50%.
The whole Brexit process has revealed that even more. So that's, be interesting to say how many people actually are even asked with any of it anymore. You know?
Yeah, that's why the Brexit Party then have literally basically given up and said, "Oh, if you want Brexit, go and vote for Tory." Yeah, I think because if you do have the Brexit Party there, yeah, like you say, maybe more people just get fed up and decide not to vote at all. But on a note of something you were talking about earlier on with Google and that, and you said you can't find things anymore. You think that when you put in a search bar and you go Google page 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you stop and just do something completely different, that's been logged. Oh, look, here's somebody, and they'll only search 4 pages if they're looking for something. And then they've added that all up. Same with YouTube, Oh, this guy is looking for a particular video. He scrolled down over 50 videos, didn't find it, and went and did something else. They know that, so they know how deep they've got to bury things, and yet they can still leave it there and say, "Oh, what are you talking about? It's there on page 8," because 7 is as far as most people would go. Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because it reminded me about the I can't remember what American show it was on. They were interviewing one of the YouTube officials. It might even have been Wojcicki herself. I can't remember. But they were talking about the whistleblower coming out saying about how they worked as a Google censor and they were suffering PTSD and they had to leave the job because they couldn't cope with looking at all the material that they were asked to censor and whatever. And during this interview, she happens to let slip about how some of their employees have been almost red-pilled in effect by the content that they've been looking at. So again, it proves that the system is reacting to something because there is something to react to. So what has been happening here on the internet, what people have been doing in terms of questioning the official narratives and trying to share information with each other has been effective, because if it wasn't, the system wouldn't have needed to react the way it has. The fact that it has reacted means it was having an effect. They also mentioned the 1% thing, that this was on their Twitter feed, the YouTube Twitter feed, and they were on about how they successfully pushed authoritative sources to the front. And, now there is only something like less than 1% of content that people look at is considered borderline and whatever. It's just that, I could rant for ages about how they mess with the numbers and stuff like that. So you got to question the numbers in the first place. But the fact that they're saying this to the public is like, telling the public, we're glad you're dumb. We're glad you're not thinking for yourself. Well done for not thinking for yourself. You get a little gold star on your report card. You've been a good little child and you've only looked at the stuff that we've told you to look at. They're
Well,
trying
yeah.
to convince people that, you know, there's only 1% of stuff that, you know, is the naughty stuff. It's
Yeah,
just
and let's not
bloody-
forget, you know, what do all these politicians, what do they all do? All these prime ministers and these ministers and all these, you know, sounds like religious ministers and all the rest of it, but what do they all do? They all bend the knee to the Queen, or
kiss
they
the
all
ring.
kiss the ring, they all bow down. So, and then you said no divine right to rule, which there is not. I mean, this is where it gets silly, and it's. I'll just repeat something David Icke said a few weeks back on his little thing I managed to catch, saying that it's who slept with whom in what order. And he's right. You know, who has sex with who in what order? That's who becomes the ruler. And it's that's how we decide it. So, you know, there you go.
They used to list it that way. I don't know if they still do it in their own records. They probably do because of that kind of dogma of tradition. But they used to list it like they would list the pedigree horses or dogs. So it will be the name of the sire and the name of the mare or the female that carries the baby. Yeah? So it would say like Bud out of Squinkle. Yeah, and it'd be worded in that way. It'd be not like, oh, Bud and Squinkle got together and got married and they had a child and the child's name. No, it's like Bud out of Squinkle. It's mechanical.
Yeah.
It's like a farmer talking about breeding pedigree animals. Yeah, and they would list it that way in the genealogy. That's what they cared about. Who's bred with who?
What the bloodline is, the purity of it, and all the rest of it, and keeping
That's
it in, keeping it in the family.
I appreciated the analogy as presented in the Dune series of books. You know, the Frank Herbert story. I've mentioned this so many times over the years.
Yeah.
The way he portrays it as being these families of aristocracy bloodlines that are managed like cattle, because there is this other group of people that authorize who gets to sleep with who and who has babies with who and stuff like that. It's so they can manage the bloodlines and decide who's the one with the divine right to rule. It's nothing intrinsic in the physiology, the spirit of the being that's been born. It's more about who gets to decide who is allowed to rule. Because then that's, if you know, you could argue that's the real king. The king sat on the throne is not the king. The one who decided who is allowed to sit on the throne, that's the king.
Upholds the crown tradition. That person,
Who decided? Who is the one that writes down? You know, the queen will be this, and the crown will represent this, and what they claim it's a constitutional monarchy. In other words, supposedly we have some say as the subjects, and you fucking don't. The bureaucrats in that aristocracy class wrote down and decided how it would be.
If you want to see true crazy, go and look at the fucking history after the prophet died. Yeah, first it was his brother that they killed him. The other side killed him. Then it was his cousin. Then the first side killed him, and then it was some female relative, so they killed her. And they were just killing each other off to try and get to be the.
So that brings me back to another analogy of the One Ring. They're all fighting over the One Ring. Sometimes they will work together. Sometimes they'll operate in groups that seem to be about, you know, supporting each other, but really it's just because they're all chasing that One Ring. They're all sat around one table. They just change who sits at the head of the table.
Yeah, but in the case of Islam, the ring's been lost. Some people are just inventing an excuse. Oh no, the ring that guy over there has, that's just as good. It's just the same, yeah.
Like for Brian and the sandal. Yeah. I've got his sandal.
Oh man, crazy.
That's not the real sandal.
But the fact that they are so wedded to this idea that it must be a heritage, and you know, it must be a bloodline. Yeah, because you can't just come up and say the same things the prophet said.
It is just an arbitrary way of deciding, that's all.
Yeah.
It's the same as saying who's got blue eyes, who's got brown eyes. You know, like that experiment, that
Because most people,
psychosocial experiment.
yeah, most people have not done that inner work where they can say, yes, what that guy is saying is true. That's good. Most people just can't do that. They can't make that kind of judgment themselves.
Mm.
Yeah? So they say, oh yes, his blood comes from that family. Oh well.
Well, I think I think in the early days it was just about violence that created a hierarchy. Just be more violent and more brutal, and people come into line because you'll kill them.
Yeah,
and they respect you for that, and they won't go near you, and they'll do what they're told. In a sense, you got like that kind of dictatorship leadership back in the day.
And then it became who is the most conniving, who is the most cunning.
Yeah,
because the more cunning would manipulate the strong to work for them. So you get back to that stage of the real ruler is not the king sat on the throne, the guy with the muscles and the big sword. No, it's the little guy stood behind the throne, the one who's using his brain to manipulate the king to do what he wants.
Yeah, because at some point, like Machiavelli and that is saying, you know, there are lots of people out there who want to be leader, but they just want power. Maybe only over a little bit or whatever. So, you know, the powerful people like Game of Thrones, they realise that they are a class of people, the ones that want to grab the power. And the best way that they can win is not to kill each other, to tolerate each other, so to speak. So, you know, they'll kill the enemy's army, but they'll leave, like Napoleon, they'll put him on an island as a prisoner, and maybe they'll escape and he'll build another army and come back again. Yeah,
or they can allow him out to build another army when they want to make use of that situation again. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, why the hell did they not hang Napoleon? The guy who used to put his hand inside his jacket, incidentally, if anybody knows what that means.
Yeah, the hidden hand. Yeah. And that brings us then, as another analogy, to the situation as it stands now, where they are bringing in known extremists and criminals and protecting them I mean, this is just talking about the UK situation, but this is applicable to other countries as well, protecting them and then throwing up their hands going, oh, what can we do when they attack people on London Bridge and do terrible things? Yeah, they need them there as a stable of operatives that they can call on to fuel their narratives when they want to.
Yeah, I mean,
that's why they don't. That's why they don't lock them up somewhere safe and secure, because they need them to perpetuate their bullshit claims to authority.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to ask yourself. I mean, how often is it going to be that there was a random attack and somebody's just able to get a hold of a narwhal tusk? Yeah, I mean, it's not like you can leave a narwhal tusk in a little emergency police box on every corner. You know?
I didn't dig further into it, but I was thinking about that again the other day after I talked about it last week, and I reckon there's probably a guild connection. Because I think where it came from was the fishmonger's hall, which is not necessarily part of the market. It's a guild hall, as far as I remember, which means you've then got the connections into the guilds of the City of London and, you know, their involvement with the rest of the infrastructure. So it makes it more likely that it was a setup in that, well, isn't it highly appropriate that somebody from the Fishmongers Guild grabbed a narwhal's tusk and came running down the road, blah, blah, blah. Too many coincidences.
I mean, just think about going into William Hill, the bookmakers, the day before. I bet there's going to be a terrorist event tomorrow, and the bloke just scratches thing and says, oh, okay, you know, evens. No, here in London, 50-1. And somebody is going to attack the terrorist with a narwhal tusk. I'll give you 50 million to 1 on that, mate. I mean, you would have been quidsing if you could have predicted it. Somebody's going to use a narwhal tusk. I mean, just the odds, man.
Well, you know, interestingly, this has sort of gone back in a little connection again. I mentioned last Monday about the narwhal and the narwhal tusk and its connection to the mythology about unicorns, and the part of it being the water element and the power coming from the water and that old idea of the waters being where everything springs from. You know, God created everything out of the waters. But also, when I was looking through my notes, like I mentioned earlier, I thought about just doing like a list saying there was this event and this event and this event, just to sort of make a point about how many out in the open things have occurred over the last year. But the first one in my list was talking about the pangolin that occurred at the beginning of the year. I don't know if you remember that. And we were talking about how it was on the cover, the Economist cover, and then it sort of cropped into other parts of the media, and they were talking about how endangered the pangolin was, and how the skin was prized, or the scales were prized. And then we were looking at there's some esoteric connections here to the mythology that again connects to unicorns and phoenix and phoenixes. I'm not sure if there's a plural for that here, pheni. But that's like full circle from the beginning of the year with the stuff about the pangolin to now the end of the year with the potential phoenix kind of connotations with what's happening with Andrew.
Have you seen Pockets of the Future today about the roach?
Not today.
Joe Biden, you've got to watch this. Joe Biden is giving a talk. I think it might be the one in Iowa where somebody calls him out. And he mentions a roach for some reason. Yeah. And Cardi B has been talking about roaches. And even I think Donald Trump used the word roach in one of his things. And it's like they're just putting it in there to see if anybody's looking. And it's really weird. Yeah. You have to watch that yourself because Pockets of the Future, it's a really strange thing. Yeah. People have been talking about roaches.
Yeah.
There's a dog out there. I mean, no, yeah. I mean, sure, it's weird that they should be talking about roaches like that. But
that stinks of preceding, foreshadowing. Like they're deliberately dropping it out in public because they're getting the idea into public's head, ready for when something goes pop, and it's got some kind of connection to roaches.
Maybe be eating them.
Yeah. Maybe they're going to start selling the green processed roach bars. Yeah.
Roach burger.
Yeah, roach milk. It's good for you, Dave. No wrong with roach milk.
Roach dog. Oh no.
You want a roach burger? Yeah, it'll be added to the list of the mystery burgers that you can get now.
Nubian was also mentioned in the chat about why are the constellations the way they are. Which reminded me that 3,000 years ago, well, firstly, if you watch the astrotheology stuff, you will see that, there are stories in the Bible about Jason and his brothers going to Egypt, and somebody said to them, "Oh, don't mention that you're of the ram, because they still worship the bull over there," talking about the zodiac signs, the way they slowly turn around. But there was also Draco, the dragon, the snake, 3,000 years ago, was the North Star. And you've seen that in Göbekli Tepe and other places. And, again, you could argue that the Bible story of Adam and Eve was the snake of Draco. Yeah, North Star. That's the point. Yeah. That's where to point your compass, basically, because that's where all the new stuff comes from. You notice when there are earthquakes because of a solar magnetic field, it's the southern part of the sun that can create earthquakes more so than the northern part, because the northern part of the sun is the part that's aiming for the North Pole. That's the future, which is hopefully going to be good. So the snake represented the future at one time, because
the flow of the river, the movement of time.
Yeah, so the future.
That's that connection to the sine wave again. The snake being the oscillation of time. Without the oscillation, you can't have any perception of time. And without perception of time, there is no linear progress within this physical reality. There is no physical reality, full stop.
Yeah, and it was a snake that is at the North Pole, which is where we're heading. So that is the future, whereas the South Pole is everything that's past.
Well, I've got to say this as well, because it's just rattling in my head and it won't go away, just to make a point. If I'm remembering it correctly, you mentioned him earlier, Napoleon. As far as I can remember, Napoleon is attributed for the modern concept of Western astrology, because he was the one that brought back the stonework from Egypt, the astrological stone. It was like an astrological calendar stone, and it's from approximately that point that the concept develops across Europe and leads into like the school of theosophy and things like that, and the spiritualist church and whatever. But I'm pretty sure it was him when he went down into Egypt and brought back various things from there, and one of them was the astrology stone, as far as I remember.
So the zodiac was not something.
So the zodiac stone.
So that was not something that Shakespeare would have talked about, or he would have talked about individual stars. Or
I wonder if that's in the British Museum or somewhere. That stone, maybe.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm not sure if I'm even remembering it correctly. I can't remember the details. But
yeah,
I mean, actually codifying the 12 signs, because before that, I'm sure there was understanding of constellations and the zodiac and the time of year, but how much I don't know.
Well, I had a good quote anyway. I remembered one: when the power of love overcomes the love of power, there's no a bit of peace. I think Jimi Hendrix. Yeah, it's we're still in those times, even more so now, it seems.
The music, the artists, art and drama and music. It's one of the main vehicles. They've known about this for a long time. It's how we pass on our stories to each other. And it's those stories that carry over the length of time. They're immortal in effect, as long as there's people to remember them and pass them on. And in that way, you can encode knowledge over vast periods of time. So they knew they had to have control over the stories and who was telling them and who was presenting them to the public. And that included music. And Plato writes about that. In the Republic, he talks about how we have to, the state has to have control over all forms of entertainment and drama and the plays and whatever, because they can be used as a vehicle to educate people or to put ideas in their heads to propagandize them,
steer them.
Yeah.
Well, that seems the internet's job these days.
That's why when some of them say too much, or like Icarus, they fly too near the sun and start revealing too much truth, they add them to the 27 Club. Because there's a fair amount of evidence that show that Hendrix didn't die by accident. He was more likely killed.
Well, here's an interesting fact, and this is a fact. The autopsy report said that he had 2 liters of wine in his lungs when they opened him up and looked inside. He had 2 liters of wine. Now, to get 2 liters of wine into your lungs, you'd either have to be unconscious while someone actually poured it into your mouth, or dead, or just literally pouring it.
Drowned in a bath of wine.
Yeah, you couldn't do that alive. It just wouldn't be possible to get that much wine in your lungs. So that's would lead to some sort of people to think, there's something wrong here. Yeah, definitely. And all these stars, all of these sort of what you call ones who seem to have a slightly different take on things, a different look at life, and maybe could have influenced far too many people to think good and think well and all the rest of it. They had to be gotten rid of, or
or turned into something like the
commercial Madonna,
the crazy crap that they push on the mainstream.
The shit, basically, the ones who swallow take the do the deal with the devil, whatever you want to call it. They're the ones who they like more. But those who come along independently, doesn't seem as many. It seems more broader these days. I mean, the internet has changed a lot with music, especially with music contracts and things. Artists and stars are making more music, just touring and stuff off what they're selling themselves via the internet and all the different ways you can do it these days.
And in a good way as well. It's created an opportunity for a renaissance in the arts, especially in music. It's easier than ever to self-publish your own stuff And even if only a few people get to hear it, you're still publishing publicly, and so you have an opportunity to be able to put your stuff out there if you want that kind of public attention for it.
Yeah.
And it's also a good opportunity for people to just have a medium that they can use of in that way. They might not necessarily want to be famous, but it's an opportunity for them to create their stuff, whether it be art or music. And then if other people appreciate it, that's great. But, you know, you don't have to join in the industry anymore. You don't have to join in with the machine. You just have to be careful how you use this internet technology, because the machine would love to exploit your creativity. If you can stick $1 on it, like Bill Hicks says, you know, stick $$ sign on it, they will. Every time you give them, give them an inch, they'll do that. Or in the modern version, they'll stick a rainbow on it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, Gary mentioned Pockets of the Future, the channel, and that guy talks a lot about up and coming and newer stars that are out there. One in particular he's gone on about recently is Billie Eilish, and it's more for teenage girls. I'd imagine she's a girl, so and you know, the sort of stuff she's pushing, the sort of stuff she talks about seems a bit weird and bizarre, in the sense of that's how they want the kids or want that sort of audience to be like or empathetic to, in that sense. And it's interesting because like I say, he talks a lot about how, and it's not just her, there's lots of others as well, but it's the ones that sort of come out of the blue quickly, could rise quickly, the ones who are suddenly put before you, and then their stories put before you, or their emotional states are put before you, how they think and how they are, and then they know that energy of that kind of age group is very much like that. It's very much likes to have someone they can relate to in that sense, but then they harness that and manipulate it. So yeah, I think it's an interesting channel. Go and check it out. He's got lots of good stuff on there. Pockets of the Future, it's called. If you haven't already found it, it is quite interesting. And he does talk a lot of other stuff as well, not just about the crazy Holly weird and all that stuff, which is, as we know, is Holly weird indeed. Yeah,
he's had me laughing out loud sometimes when he does Cardi B, because he'll stop the video, and sometimes he's one of those guys who can stop a video and it doesn't matter what the person is saying, because his comments are funny. And she was just sitting there, with his long nails. There she is, the demon with her talons. And just in that moment, she was clicking her nails on the table. She looked exactly like that. Yeah, that's a good quote by Newbie. Yeah, that Billie Eilish, I saw that one the other day. Yeah, if it's a girl, it might be a bloke. I noticed you mentioned that. And she was getting people to stub cigarettes out on her face. And I'm thinking, no. If she's got 1 million viewers, one of them is going to try it. Yeah, statistically, that's a horrible thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them out there at the moment that are
very disturbing.
Like the emanation of nihilism. Yeah, I can remember back in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of young people, like I was a young person in the 70s and 80s, who thought that our future prospects as a member of society, as a worker, were somewhat limited. In the UK, it was at the rise of Thatcher and whatever, and it wasn't exactly impossible to find work, but it was difficult, and the choices were limited. Basically, a lot of people had an attitude of, well, the future's looking pretty shit for us, and you had still the rolling out of the punk kind of genre was still going then in the 70s and 80s. Well, certainly in the 70s, but into the 80s a bit as well. But what I experienced back then has been that kind of youth despondency at the situation and the way it looked in life. But compare that to now, and I could see that it could be argued, I think the system would argue this as a plausible deniability, that the youth are reacting to that sense of despondency, that they're looking at the future and thinking there's nothing there for us. It's all crap, it's all debt, and nothing better than the boomers had in their generation. Okay, boomer and all that shit. That's deliberately to propagate and push this point. Yeah. But I would argue that sense of extreme despondency and nihilism that comes along with problems like depression and narcissism kind of tendencies and stuff like that's propagated by the system and pushed onto most of the young people.
Yeah, there's another factor to add into that, Cookie, and that is the fact that even when you was unemployed or in the 70s and 80s when we were growing up, yeah, there was television and then there was real life. But a lot of these kids, they are living, what's the word?
Vicariously.
Vicariously, that's a brilliant word. They're living their emotions through somebody else's emotions, but they're not turning off from that. They're doing it all the time. And of course, the thing like that, it's like watching on the screen 101 Days of Sodom or something like that. Yeah, things have to get more and more extreme. And eventually they're going to come back to real life. And they're only going to do it through hurting themselves.
Yeah. And their own life seems to be more of a desert of the real, so they desperately try to escape further and further into the virtual life that is portrayed as being this perfect, like you say, the Sodom and Gomorrah element, but there's also the kind of Babylon illusion element of their virtual life seems far more enjoyable and fulfilling to them, especially when they're getting a dopamine hit. Whereas their real life, their everyday normal life seems like they got no hope. There's no prospects in the future. They're going to be in debt and it's all just horrible and nasty. And yeah. So.
Well, they're right. yeah.
I do think stuff.
This is why we need solutions, you see, and solutions is what we do try and discuss here and talk about over the years we've been doing this, and
that's why I think they deliberately project the kind of stuff like we're talking about, like the Eilish stuff and whatever. They deliberately project that at the youth.
Yeah, because
the youth have a lot of opportunities. I know, can rant for hours talking about the way the world is at the moment, whatever, but there are a lot of opportunities and there are a lot of solutions out there. It's something that we often talk about as well. If you go and look, you will find that there are solutions to a lot of the problems that people usually are asking questions about, but they don't want they don't want the youth to go and look. They want the youth to just fall in on themselves and see nothing but desolation, the desolation of Smaug, so that they end up turning in on themselves and they resort to that device to give them the vicarious hit and sense of being alive.
Starting with your own bedroom. Don't just clean it. Don't clean it up like Jordan Peterson says. Go and rip pictures out of magazines and stick them to the wall. Make your own mural and make it a living mural, changing every day. Something new up there every day. I mean, when we was living in Paris and we was living in squats, we used to take these huge posters from films, take them back to the squat and put them back on the wall. Some of them are quite good. So
redecorated.
Decorate your room. Do something.
Be creative, isn't it? In the physical, and they're not. It's a skill that's gone because of the digital world that they've been born into.
Well, and it's social regulation as well. I mean, when I was a kid, you can put a picture on your wall, but you don't do much more than that. And I'm going to a squat, and people there with fucking spray cans, putting whatever they want on the wall, and why not?
Well, I think they still do. I mean, I know kids, that's all got the things and stuff.
They'll happily spray whatever all over your wall. This crazy guy's asking us to do sprays on his wall. What's words? Come back tomorrow and there's just like a wall of graffiti.
I'll just quickly mention Banksy put a new mural up in Birmingham of all places. Did you see that today on the news?
Man, that's like a death knell. If Banksy turns up sticking murals in your area, then he's pointing at you, calling you shit.
Well, Reindeers is on a wall, and he's done it where it's connected to a part, like a bench, where there's a homeless guy sleeping on the bench in Rio, and then this reindeer is up like it's.
So it's the homeless Father Christmas.
Yeah, sort of thing. Yeah.
Did you see the banana?
That could be called racist.
Did you see the banana stunt? This is what I was reminded of because you mentioned Pinocchio the other day, and I went in and looked on this guy. He's put a banana on a wall. I think he's in Miami, yeah, and he's duct taped a banana to the wall, and it's
Oh,
sold
yeah.
for 120,000.
Someone ate it.
Somebody's gone in there and just pulled it off the wall and ate it, and it's supposed to be real, not a part of the stunt. Yeah, but the guy that was doing it says, "Oh, I'm an artist as well, but I'm a performance artist, not connected at all." You're supposed to think, but I don't.
I'm a performance artist as well, and my performances, you can't complain. That's my performance art.
Well, nobody can share this video now because it's got a picture. It's got a picture of Cookie putting his fingers up, and it's been copyrighted. Yeah, but this guy, he did. He's actually sounds interesting, more interesting than the other guy that makes the big shiny animals. I can't remember his name.
Boris Johnson. Does he make big?
Yeah, basically, you know those things you get from the Chinese bazaar. Yeah, they usually blow them up with helium, little deer or rabbits, and they're really shiny, and they blow them up. Yeah, we used to make massive ones of these. You know the guy I mean. But this guy, he made a big model of Pinocchio, and it looked like it fell off a balcony. It was lying on the bottom of a swimming pool. Yeah. And that was like, like his strings have been cut and blop. He's gone into the pool. He's quite an interesting guy, I guess. Yeah? He's amusing, I suppose. Yeah, he's always doing different things.
It's usually an indicator as well that there's going to be some kind of funding funneled into that area that based on the narratives of the collective academia, if that all makes sense, or is just a bunch of word salad. Yeah? If he's turning up and painting murals in your area, then expect the intelligentsia to turn up soon after and start gentrifying the area.
Yeah, and let's not forget, Miami was a place where the judge demanded the Epstein papers be published. But that's all gone now because somebody turned up and ate the situation, like eating a banana. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah.
Anyway, I was going to say, Cookie, this is your last one, isn't it?
It's the last one for this year, more than likely. Like I said, if something weird happens over the election and whatever, then I might do one next week, but I doubt it. But we will be on Wednesday night, yeah?
Yeah, Wednesday. It's the 11th, and hopefully that number 10 tomorrow hasn't done it. Well, we'll just see how we go.
Yeah.
I think we'll be fine.
The night before, the day after.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to wrap it up there because it's just gone to 10 o'clock. Thanks for joining in, guys. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in and joined in the chat room. Sorry, I hardly paid any attention to have a read down, but I just got too distracted yakking. So, sorry, folks. I will read back through the chat afterwards. But thanks for joining in. Thanks for giving us your attention for a couple of hours. And we'll be back on Wednesday night on the Reality Chat channel. I don't know if Steve Tagoose is on this week because he's off on holiday somewhere, but he might be. And if he is, he's on Thursday night on his channel. And thanks again. Have a great Christmas. If you enjoy that kind of thing, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Cookie. Cheers all.
Right.
Yeah, night one.
Click the button.